Contact tracing, the last nail in the coffin of liberty and freedom for America and the world. Every freaking state is talking about implementing contact tracing. Google, Apple, all the rest of them working diligently on technology to allow them to figure out everybody you came in contact with if they deem you to be at risk of having, right now it's COVID-19, but it'll be any disease they decide. If we don't stand up and fight against this, it really is the end.
We also realize that as we find more contacts, some of the people we find are going to have trouble being isolated. For instance, if they live in a home where there's only one bathroom and there are 3 or 4 other people living there, and those people don't have COVID infection, we're not going to be able to keep the person in that home. Every person who we're isolating, for instance, needs to have their own bathroom. And so we'll be moving people like this into other kinds of housing that we have available. They'll also...
Did you hear that? If there's not enough bathrooms in your house and they deem you at risk, they're going to have to pull you out and put you in some internment center somewhere that, you know, has the appropriate number of bathrooms. It's incredible that they can talk this way with a straight face. How would you like a guy like this deciding on how your life's going to go? Because that's exactly where this shit is going.
Last week, Dr. Michael Ryan, he's a leader at the World Health Organization, announced that in response to the spread of this virus, authorities may have to enter people's homes and remove family members, presumably by force.
In most parts of the world, due to lockdown, most of the transmission that's actually happening in many countries now is happening in the household, at family level. In some senses, transmission has been taken off the streets and pushed back into family units. Now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them in a safe and dignified manner.
They'll also have other needs, perhaps, food, whatever it's going to be. The county will be there to back them up and to support them.
So the new police force are going to be contact tracers. They're going to start with 10 people and quickly move to probably 10,000. In fact, it'll be the #1 employer in the country. Contact tracers. Wow, it really is hard to freaking believe. But continue to listen. It's only a couple minutes more of this guy. By the way, this is, I think it's on the screen, but this is Ventura County, California. No surprise. Of course, California would be the first one to push on this. But New York's doing it, Oregon's doing it, Washington State is doing it, Pennsylvania, where I live, has talked about doing it, Virginia's doing it, etc. And it's not just Democrats. It's Democrats, Republicans. It's the government infrastructure that wants to extend and expand itself, like any organism. So sit back and enjoy.
Is to bring on people. We're going to start with 10 people. We may bring on up to 50 or even more as the program grows and as we see the needs for it. As we do more testing, we will find more and more people who have COVID-19. And
if we do more testing and find people that have COVID-19 or COVID-20 or COVID-32 or some other name that we apply from our fake test kits that nobody knows what the test is actually doing. Whether or not it's false positives or false negatives, nobody freaking knows. Because who's building these test kits? Well, it isn't the Chinese who we can trust. It's the big multinational pharmaceutical companies, mostly funded by Bill Gates and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or the Clinton Foundation, or the Clinton Health Initiative. Wow. I mean, I had trouble sleeping last night after I saw these videos and thought, I got to put something together, because I'm sure there'll be hundreds of videos about this in the coming days and weeks, but I wanted to get something out. So Continue to be flabbergasted by what you're going to hear over the course of the next 10 minutes.
And again, we'll isolate every one of them, and we will find every one of their contacts, and we will make sure that they stay quarantined, and we'll check in with them every day.
So imagine this scenario. You post something on Twitter or Facebook or some other social media site, and the powers that be don't like it, don't appreciate it. Now today all they can do is just ban it, eliminate it, take it out of the algorithm, etc. So limit the viewership. With this program, contact tracing, they can get you and everybody you've come in contact with selectively and lock them up, intern them for whatever the period of time they deem necessary. Right now I think it's 2 weeks for the COVID-19 monster, the invisible disease. But think about it. You say something they don't like, so they come and get you. And then they say, well, we want to know everybody you've come in contact with over the last 2 weeks. And so anybody that's in your little circle they don't like, they just intern them as well. I mean, this is literally the brown shirts without the brown shirts. Instead, they'll be wearing fucking hazmat suits and masks and goggles and so on. That's what will be showing up at your house to pull you out, throw you in a freaking ambulance or some other vehicle and take you to some internment camp, who knows where, but they're going to check on you every day, make sure you're okay. Because this is the guy that's going to run the program for Ventura County. I'm sure Pennsylvania, and I'll show you the Secretary of Health in Pennsylvania, that's the kind of person that will be running it in the state I live.
In other words, what this program means is that we're going to do a more complete job and we're going to do a more meticulous job of making it less and less possible for others in the county to run into someone with COVID-19 infection.
Of course, this program conveniently won't be implemented until after enough old people die, because this is clearly part of the intention. I know it sounds crazy, but I mean, all the facts are pretty clear. They want to get rid of as many old people as they can. I mean, it reduces Social Security burn, Medicare burn. We're talking billions and billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. And what did Cuomo do? And a lot of other Democrats, they said, you know what? Let's put all the COVID-19 patients in nursing homes where the old people are, because that's really smart. And, you know, I'm a really smart guy, says Cuomo. So I think New York has had well over 5,000 deaths from this COVID-19 in nursing homes. And I think California is another one that's way up there. In fact, all the Democrat states are. The Democrats are no question pushing this harder than anybody. But if you look, and I have, you'll find that there's Republicans that are behind it as well. There's no question they love the Chinese model. They're unaccountable. They get the... I mean, it's clear they talk one way, they say one thing, but they mean another. They love the Chinese model, the communist model. They freaking love it. And if you don't think they're going to try to implement it here, you're really naive and dangerous, dangerously naive. So, wake up.
It's not just our county that's bringing more people on. There are going to be thousands of people hired who will be these contact investigators throughout the state. And this is occurring in many, many other states as well, perhaps all of the states in our country. We will be giving intensive training to these people, training not only for identifying and finding contacts, but also in terms of how to be sensitive about doing it. We also realize that as we find more contacts, some of the people we find are going to have trouble being isolated. For instance, if they live in a home where there's only one bathroom and there are 3 or 4 other people living there and those people don't have COVID infection, we're not going to be able to keep the person in that home. Every person who we're isolating, for instance, needs to have their own bathroom. And so we'll be moving people like this into other kinds of housing that we have available. They'll also have other needs, perhaps, food, whatever it's going to be. The county will be there to back them up and to support them.
All right, enough listening to the schmuck from Ventura County. I'm sure there'll be hundreds of other videos from other county departments of health, state departments of health, and eventually the CDC and the NIH and the FDA and all the other corrupt government organizations telling us about how contact tracing is going to change our lives for the better. No question it's coming. All right, well, enough with that guy. I'm going to play another short video from Bloomberg, surprising as it may sound, that describes contact tracing and the relevance of data security and personal information, etc. It's actually a pretty good video. Obviously, I wouldn't have put it in this stream if I didn't think so. So enjoy it. I'll probably plug in a couple times during it, but in general, I'm going to let it play through, and then I'll come back at the end and just sort of summarize. So enjoy.
This is such a vast spider web of contacts.
This data that will be transferring between phones will now be encrypted. What more do we know about how this is actually going to work?
The clamor to improved contact tracing has seen nations like Israel, Singapore, South Korea, and of course China using a combination of location data, video camera footage, and credit card information to track and contain COVID-19 in their countries.
We're prepared and we're doing a great job with it, and it will go away. Just stay calm. It will go away.
The U.S. has lagged behind, but Google and Apple are feverishly building a contact tracing platform scheduled for release in mid-May. It will enable the use of Bluetooth technology to help governments and health agencies reduce the spread of the virus by tracing people who have come into close contact with COVID-19. But how exactly this information will be used in the future and with whom is an open question.
We're kind of at this fascinating moment, right, where we don't know exactly what the response is going to look like. We know that robust contact tracing is going to be a huge part of reopening the economy. And we know that we have to balance that with privacy concerns somehow, but we don't know exactly what the balance is going to look like. And I leave it up to the epidemiologists to say whether you need to be as repressive as China, or if there are ways to protect privacy. We might not have a ton of time to debate it.
And that's kind of the problem. There are currently few legal protections from data misuse or abuse. And while some states do have some laws in place, progress on this front has been halted.
There was some privacy momentum in Congress before the pandemic hit, and that's been destroyed for obvious reasons.
California passed a privacy law a couple of years ago, and there's been a lot of work to try to improve it as it goes into effect this year. A bunch of other states had been considering privacy legislation as well, like Washington State and New York. And then COVID comes, and a lot of the state legislatures have just pretty much shut down.
So they talk about legislation here and how the states, shut down because of the COVID-19, and so none of the legislation was passed. They'll eventually pass privacy legislation, but it'll be illusionary because all that legislation can be superseded by one or both of two things: the Patriot Act and or the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. Both of those things, in the context of a national emergency, various other exceptions, supersede any other laws, any other regulations. So they're going to be able to do what they want, even if they create the illusion of laws and regulations that your information is safe. Everybody knows our information isn't safe. How many hacks happen a year that take our data and sell it on the web? Our social security number, our credit card information, our address and mortgage data, that's mostly public. So there's no way that this data will stay where it needs to or where it should in the context of epidemiology or virology. It's all bullshit. They're lying to us just fucking non-stop every day, every second. Frustrating? A little bit. All right, hang in there.
A lot of the state legislatures have just pretty much shut down.
Now, before you envision a Black Mirror episode for your personal future, you should know that as of now, involvement will be voluntary. The data it collects is to be anonymized, and there will be no central server where the data is stored, so governments or corporations can't directly grab all this private data for its own purposes. But that could easily change.
But there's nothing really to stop them from having a centralized database. It's only kind of the restraint of our expectations. If our expectations were to become overturned and again shift tremendously over to safety, it could become a lot more Orwellian a lot quicker.
There's many scenarios that could be quite troubling. Your information could be given to insurance companies and it could be used as a pre-existing condition that prevents you from getting insurance or as a reason to charge you much higher prices. The information could be sold to data brokers who could then package it to anyone that they want. The information could end up with your employer, who could use it to make decisions about whether to promote you because of your health.
Now, that may sound a little paranoid, but we have good reason to be suspicious.
These are entities that already collect enormous amounts of our data in a commercial context, and whose mishandling of data has come under fire in the past.
Exhibit A.
Cambridge Analytica.
Cambridge Analytica?
Cambridge Analytica. We just traded away like everything there is to know about ourselves, for Farmville. And I think that people are starting to realize that wasn't a good trade.
In 2016, the big data company Cambridge Analytica took the personal data of millions of Americans from Facebook. They packaged it and sold it so that political groups could then target parts of the population with narrow-casted messages.
People were sharing information with friends, and they weren't necessarily expecting that data to be shared by a company like Cambridge Analytica that was making use of it to build political profiles and then serve specific advertisements or propaganda.
Cambridge Analytica really captures the dilemma of privacy, which is how data collected for one reason with certain expectations is used for another reason.
We have been giving away all of our most private information to companies that have then sold it on and created what is now a multi-trillion-dollar a year industry.
This was business as usual as far as Facebook developers went.
This scandal resulted in the Federal Trade Commission's fining of Facebook for $5 billion, as well as a general push for broader privacy laws.
We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake.
Yeah, Cambridge Analytica, that was a good one a few years ago, where they took, I think, 80 million records from people, all their data, all their contacts, everything they've ever posted, etc. You were probably one of the people, I was probably one of the people, that they pulled down the data from Mark Zuckerberg. You can tell in this clip how sincere he is and how concerned and sorry he is, because he's concerned and sorry. He really is. He needs an oil job right at the top of his neck. He looks a little stiff. Robots tend to get stiff, as we know from The Wizard of Oz. Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, the Clintons, Mark Zuckerberg, Dorsey, the guy that runs Twitter. I can go on and on and on. China owns Reddit now. We're screwed, man. The worst addiction I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen people die from addictions. Cell phones. Worst addiction in the world. Smartphones. They're fucking evil. And I do plan on doing a video on how I'm going to handle the smartphone issue here soon as I can find an alternative. And I pretty much have one queued up, so stay tuned for that. All right, we're about at the end, so continue enjoying the last few minutes of this. It really is a good video, surprisingly so. By the way, Mike Bloomberg, for those of you that don't know, was just endorsed by Mayor Cuomo to run the contact tracing division, group, company, whatever it is, in New York State. So Bloomberg, the guy who's worth, I don't know, $150 billion, whatever it is, some number that's just off the charts, is going to run contact tracing in New York. And New York partnered with, I believe, Connecticut and New Jersey to expand the offering into those states as well. Pennsylvania hasn't partnered up with New York yet, But Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania is a Democrat, and he's an evil, criminal, stupid, retarded person. I know that's a non-politically correct word, but that's what he is. And there's no question he'll endorse Cuermo's and Bloomberg's tactics relative to contact tracing. So stay tuned for that. Bloomberg wants to get a corner on it with Bill Gates. I mean, so enjoy the last few minutes of the video, and I'll come back and just summarize quickly.
Sorry. What you're seeing is a greater bipartisan concern about the power of these dataopolies and how do we rein them in.
So how do we know this isn't going to happen this time? The answer comes back to those privacy protection laws that have been put on hold because of the pandemic.
If there had been a national privacy law enacted before the pandemic hit us, we probably would have been in a better position to respond to it with data.
But even if there was a national privacy law in place, contact tracing is actually pointless if we don't have widespread testing to go along with it, which we don't.
So what is this about? Is this a smokescreen for collecting a lot of data? Is the data truly going to stay anonymized or aggregated? The pandemic is showing why a general privacy law is so important, because there's so much confusion around data collection, concern that there will be overreach, and lack of rules about how the information could be reused for other purposes.
Laws are going to be needed to stem a lot of this corporate data collection. And I think you're only going to see those efforts continue. Short term, I think they may be delayed because of COVID, but I think the fundamental concerns around overly broad corporate collection aren't going away.
I don't see some centralized bureaucracy that will then be shared with the police and the IRS and your future employer and your future insurer, at least not right now. But it is worth noting that some of those things aren't forbidden.
I made a couple notes to summarize here. First of all, this video focuses on the data more than anything else, in fact, exclusively. It isn't the data that is the point of this. It's a byproduct. It's a benefit to the corporations, to the government. They need the data for sure, but it's not about the data. It's about control. It's about controlling society. There's no question about it, number one. Number two, just to remind us perpetually that we're always in danger and always need to be afraid, we'll have social distancing in every location around the planet. There'll be little red circles of where you can and can't stand. People will be wearing masks. They'll be forced to wear masks. And if not forced, half the population will wear them anyway because they're crazy. Because they believe this shit. It's really unbelievable. Be prepared to see people in hazmat suits and face shields and masks and goggles and oxygen tanks. Be prepared to see it, because that will generate more fear than anything else when you see a van pull up to your neighbor's house and pull the people out, screaming and ranting as they're pushed into a van and taken to some internment center. I know this sounds crazy in America, but trust me, this is happening here and every other country in the world. We're following the freaking Chinese model. It's really hard to believe. Let's see. Fast rollout. This is going to happen really fast. There's not going to be time for legislation. There's not going to be time for debate. The governors, the tyrannical governors, are implementing this shit as fast as they possibly can. I already told you, Cuermo and Bloomberg are implementing it in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. I have a house in New Jersey down the beach. I won't have it much longer. So let's see. 5G. People talked about 5G and how it's creating this thing. I don't believe any of that, because this virus is all over the world and 5G is still pretty limited in terms of deployment. But I am certain that a lot more of that infrastructure has been deployed in Britain, in the United States, and most Western parts of the world, probably in Russia, because they need 5G to get this data in real time so they can do the real-time analysis. And then they can effectively control the population. So 5G is coming. There's no question about it. Is it bad for you? Does, microwaves hurt your cell structure? Gee, I don't know. I doubt it. But that's coming. That's a requirement. Trump has been pushing it as Anybody that's been paying attention knows. England, Britain has been pushing it. In fact, Britain went and signed a deal with Huawei, the Chinese provider of 5G telecommunications networks, infrastructure, software, etc. And, you know, we can trust the Chinese. We know that for sure. So the question is, will Britain break that relationship with Huawei? Trump and the administration have threatened to pull out our resources out of Britain if they don't walk away from Huawei. So that's a good thing. We'll see what actually happens. I'm not sure. There's no way to know. There's no way to know anything. We're lied to so much all the time. Now, the last thing, do we need it? We don't need it for COVID-19 or 20 or whatever it is. What we need it for is bubonic plague, right? If we get hit with a plague that actually kills people like as they're walking down the street, which this does not do, regardless of the shit you've seen on the news, then we would need contact tracing, because that's something that could decimate the population of the world quickly. But you implement it, you get rid of that disease, you build the vaccine, you create the therapies, and then you stop it. That's not what they're going for here. They're going for perpetual contact tracing, forever. Forever wearing masks, forever social distancing, because, you know, the flu. All right, enough rambling and ranting. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you like it, you subscribe to the channel. I appreciate the comments. I'm still new to this, so I have new lights come in, and I'll get better as time goes on. But hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. There's one other point I wanted to make, so sorry for jumping back in. Between our cell phones, which will be talking Bluetooth to all the other cell phones, and I know they say you have to download it and you have to approve it and all this. That's bullshit. It'll be part of the operating system, whether it's Android or iPhone. It'll be embedded in the system. Even if you turn Bluetooth off, it doesn't mean it won't still be doing its thing. It can use RFID, it can use Bluetooth, it can use Wi-Fi. There's a bunch of different things it can use to uniquely identify a person with a phone. Number one. Number two, facial recognition. It's everywhere. It's places you don't even know it is. Not only is it on street lights and in stores and on buildings, it's freaking everywhere. And it works really well. They've gotten it down to a really tight science. They can predict who you are by certain points of your face. They can get a side view and still determine who you are unambiguously. So imagine, you go to a store around here, we call them Wawas. You go to a Wawa, you get yourself a sandwich and a soup. Not that I ever do that. And you go home and you eat your soup and you're eating your sandwich. And then, you know, a day later, maybe it's 3 days later, maybe it's 10 days later, the hazmat suits show up at your house and let you know that you were in the Wawa at the same time with somebody who was infected with this nasty thing, whatever the thing is at that particular time. Obviously right now it's COVID-19. So, and they come into your house and they say, well, you know, we're going to have to pull you out because you're in danger of infecting lots of other people. So we're going to have to pull you out, put you in our, you know, housing for 2 weeks. And then, you know, we'll see about letting you go based on our testing and what that says. So this shit is draconian, authoritarian, beyond, I mean, it's beyond Orwell. It's like George Orwell didn't think shit would go this far. And this is where we are. And we are literally days or weeks away from having this implemented. I mean, literally days or weeks away. It's May, whatever, 8th or 9th today. So, you know, probably by June, mid-June, we'll have this stuff in place. All right. That is really it. Like, subscribe, comment. Later.